He thought it was just a simple act of kindness to help a stranger get home. But that stranger was the most powerful woman in the city. One moment of generosity gave him a chance he never imagined, until the world decided to tear it all apart. A gift became a weapon, lies spread fast, and a hidden truth could change everything. When trust is shattered and reputations are on the line, can one small act of kindness still save them both? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun barely pierced through the thin curtains of the modest rental house on Oak Street. Daniel Hayes pulled his worn fleece tighter around his shoulders, his breath visible in the chilly air of the kitchen. The thermostat read 58 degrees. He'd been turning it lower each night to stretch out what little heating oil remained. His weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, the warmth offering temporary comfort as he studied the red notice from the utility company. Final warning. His eyes drifted to his wallet on the counter, already knowing what he'd find inside. A lone $5 bill, looking as tired as he felt. "Daddy? It's cold." Lily padded into the kitchen in her pink pajamas, her long brown hair tousled from sleep. "Come here, sweetheart." Daniel opened his arms, and she snuggled against him. "Let's get you an extra sweater before breakfast." In her room, he helped her layer a thick purple sweater over her school clothes. The sight of her small frame swimming in the oversized garment made his heart ache. "There we go? Better?" Lily nodded, her bright eyes showing no trace of complaint. "Much better. Can we have oatmeal?" "You got it, kiddo." Daniel forced a smile, grateful they still had half a container of quick oats in the pantry. While the oatmeal cooked, he packed Lily's lunch, the last peanut butter sandwich he could make, with what remained in the jar, an apple, and a cookie he'd been saving for her. The school had called yesterday announcing an early release due to an incoming snowstorm. It meant rearranging his work schedule at the hardware store, but his boss understood. Being a single parent meant constantly juggling, constantly adjusting. After dropping Lily at school, Daniel headed to work, watching his gas gauge hover just above empty. The morning passed in a blur of inventory counts and customer questions. By early afternoon, fat snowflakes were falling steadily as he drove toward the school. That's when he saw the stranded SUV, a black Range Rover that probably cost more than he made in 3 years. Its hazard lights pulsed orange against the white landscape, hood up, a figure in a camel hair coat pacing beside it. Daniel's first instinct was to keep driving. That $5 was all he had until his delayed paycheck arrived. But something made him slow down, perhaps the memory of all the times others had helped him since Sarah's death. He pulled over, snow crunching under his boots as he approached. The woman turned. She was maybe his age, with elegant features and expertly styled blonde hair. Everything about her spoke of wealth and polish, but her expression was pure frustration. "Having trouble?" Daniel asked, shoving his hands in his pockets. "The gauge must be broken. I could have sworn I had at least a quarter tank, but it just died." Her voice carried authority even in distress. "I have a meeting I absolutely cannot miss. Probably just need some gas to get you to a station. There's one about 3 miles ahead. I don't suppose you have a gas can?" She looked hopefully at his pickup. "No, but—" Daniel hesitated, then pulled out his wallet. "Here. It's not much, but $5 should get you enough to reach the station." She stared at the crumpled bill, then at him, her professional facade cracking slightly. "I couldn't possibly. Please, take it." He pressed the money into her gloved hand. "We all need help sometimes." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise perhaps, or recognition of a deeper truth. "I'm Caroline," she said softly. "Daniel, good luck with your meeting." He waited until she started walking toward the gas station, her heels leaving precise impressions in the snow. Then he returned to his truck, saying a quick prayer that his own tank would last until payday. The rest of the afternoon passed in domestic routine. He helped Lily with her math homework, tried not to worry about the stack of bills, and managed to make grilled cheese sandwiches with the last of the bread and cheese. Lily chatted happily over her tomato soup, oblivious to the thin meal. "Daddy makes the best grilled cheese in the whole world," she declared, and Daniel felt the familiar bittersweet ache. Sarah had always said the same thing. After dinner, he needed to move his truck, alternate side parking because of the snow. He zipped his jacket against the cold and trudged out into the darkness. That's when he saw it, a cream-colored envelope tucked under his windshield wiper. His first thought was another bill, another late notice. But the paper was thick, expensive. Inside was a single check, blank, except for an elegant signature at the bottom, Caroline Bennett. Daniel stared at the check, snowflakes landing on its pristine surface. His mind raced with possibilities: rent, heating oil, a full grocery cart. The amount was his to write. But something didn't feel right. Something about accepting money from a stranger, about taking more than he'd given. He slipped the check back into the envelope, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air as he wondered what tomorrow would bring. Daniel sat at his scratched kitchen table, the envelope illuminated by the single overhead bulb with its yellowing shade. The house was quiet now, save for the occasional creak of old wood settling and the distant hum of the neighbor's television through the thin walls. He pulled out the check again, running his thumb over the expensive paper. The signature was bold and confident: Caroline Bennett. Even her handwriting spoke of authority. His mind kept circling back to that morning, to her perfectly tailored coat and the way she'd looked at him when he offered that $5. "Lord, what am I supposed to do with this?" he whispered, rubbing his tired eyes. His ancient laptop sat on the table, a gift from the church when Sarah passed. Daniel rarely used it except for bills and helping Lily with homework, but tonight he opened it with purpose. The keys clicked softly as he typed Caroline Bennett into the search bar. His eyes widened at the results. Photos showed the same elegant woman he'd met, but now in sophisticated business attire, speaking at conferences and charity events. Headlines proclaimed her as the CEO of Bennett Industries, a billion-dollar technology company. One article called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley for her ruthless business strategies. Worth an estimated $400 million. Daniel read aloud, then let out a low whistle. No wonder she drives a Range Rover. He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking in protest. That blank check suddenly felt heavier. With her wealth, any amount he wrote wouldn't even dent her fortune. The heating bill was $342.87. The rent was due next week. Lily needed new winter boots. Sleep came fitfully that night, his dreams full of numbers and dollar signs. The next morning, Lily sat at the kitchen counter eating cereal while Daniel packed her lunch. She seemed unusually quiet. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he asked, spreading peanut butter on bread he'd bought with spare change from the truck's cup holder. "Jenny said her mom got fired from Bennett Industries last month," Lily said, stirring her cornflakes. "She said Miss Bennett is mean to everyone who works for her, that she makes people cry." Daniel's hand stilled on the sandwich. "Sometimes people say things when they're hurt or angry, Lily. It doesn't always mean they're true." "But what if they are?" Her brown eyes, so like her mother's, looked troubled. "What if she is mean?" Before Daniel could respond, a loud knock rattled the front door. Mike Turner's voice boomed through. "Danny, open up." Mike burst in without waiting, bringing a blast of cold air and his usual larger-than-life presence. His coveralls were stained with motor oil from his auto shop, and his red beard was flecked with gray, but his eyes sparkled with their usual mischief. "Hey, Princess," he said to Lily, ruffling her hair. "Mind if I steal your dad for a minute?" Once Lily was occupied with her backpack, Mike pulled Daniel into the kitchen. "So? Did you cash it yet?" Daniel blinked. "How did you—" "Small town, buddy. Caroline Bennett's driver was getting gas at my shop this morning, talking about some good Samaritan who helped her out yesterday. Then mentioned she left him a blank check." Mike grabbed Daniel's shoulders. "Please tell me you didn't tear it up in some misguided act of nobility." "No. It's right here." Daniel pulled the envelope from his wallet. Mike snatched it, letting out a low whistle at the signature. "Do you know who she is? She's loaded. This is your ticket out of the hole, Danny. Think about Lily." "I am thinking about Lily," Daniel said quietly, taking the check back. "About what I'm teaching her." "Oh, come on. She gave it to you freely. She wants to help. Then why didn't she write an amount? Why leave it blank?" Daniel shook his head. "It feels like a test, Mike. And even if it's not, I can't take money I didn't earn. It's not who I am." Mike threw up his hands. "Your integrity is going to freeze you both this winter. Better cold than compromised," Daniel said firmly, though his stomach clenched at the truth in Mike's words. After Mike left and Lily went to school, Daniel sat in his truck outside Bennett Industries' regional office. The modern glass building rose 15 stories into the gray sky, intimidating and impersonal. His reflection in the rearview mirror showed his worn jacket and 3-day stubble. He didn't belong here, but the check in his wallet demanded action. He thought of Sarah, of her unwavering belief in doing what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. That evening, Lily found him still sitting at the kitchen table, the check now back in its envelope. "Did you decide what to do, Daddy?" she asked, climbing into his lap despite being almost too big for it now. "I'm going to return it tomorrow," he said softly. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and coffee that always clung to him. "I'm glad you're one of the good guys," she whispered. Daniel held her close, his doubts melting away in the warmth of her embrace. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but tonight, in his daughter's eyes, he was still her hero. That was worth more than any amount he could write on that check. Daniel's old pickup truck looked desperately out of place in the sleek parking garage of Bennett Industries. He pulled into a visitor spot between two gleaming luxury cars, their pristine surfaces making his rust-speckled vehicle seem even more weathered. Earlier that morning, he had dropped Lily off at Jenny's house for their Saturday playdate. She'd given him an extra tight hug before running inside, as if sensing his nervousness about the task ahead. "You can do this, Daddy," she'd said with complete conviction. Now, sitting in the truck and staring up at the towering glass building through the garage's concrete levels, he wasn't so sure. The blank check sat heavy in his wallet, a reminder of why he had to do this. He straightened his tie, borrowed from Mike, who'd insisted he couldn't walk in there looking like he'd just come from the construction site. The lobby was all polished marble and steel, with a massive fountain creating a peaceful backdrop of flowing water. Behind the curved reception desk, a young woman looked up from her computer screen. "Good morning," Daniel said, clearing his throat. "I'm here to see Caroline Bennett." The receptionist's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, he began. "Daniel Hayes?" Another voice cut in. A sharp-featured woman in a charcoal suit approached, tablet in hand. "You're early. I'm Patricia Morton, Mrs. Bennett's executive assistant." Daniel opened his mouth to correct her, but she was already walking briskly toward the elevators, gesturing for him to follow. "The other candidates aren't due for another hour," she continued, tapping the elevator button. "But Ms. Bennett appreciates punctuality. The Community Outreach Coordinator position is a priority hire." His mind raced as they stepped into the elevator. This was a mistake, he needed to explain. But Patricia was already speaking again, her words quick and clipped. "The role requires someone who understands both corporate social responsibility and grassroots community work. Your application was interesting." She glanced at her tablet. "Though your resume seems to be missing from our system." The elevator doors opened onto the 15th floor. Daniel's boots sank into plush carpeting as Patricia led him down a hallway lined with abstract art. "Wait here," she instructed, showing him into a glass-walled conference room with a view of the city. "Ms. Bennett will be with you shortly." Before he could protest, she was gone, her heels clicking efficiently down the hall. Daniel stood awkwardly, the blank check burning a hole in his pocket. The conference room table could have paid his rent for months. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Caroline Bennett strode in, her attention fixed on a folder in her hands. She looked even more imposing than she had on the roadside. Elegant in a tailored navy dress, her blonde hair swept into a sophisticated updo. "Mr. Hayes," she said, still reading. "Your community service record is impressive, though your corporate experience is." She looked up then, and recognition flickered across her face. "Oh, Ms. Bennett," Daniel started. "I came to return the $5. She finished, her professional mask slipping for just a moment. "And my check?" "Yes." He pulled the envelope from his jacket pocket. "I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept it." Caroline set down her folder and studied him with new interest. "You drove all this way to return a blank check?" Her tone was curious rather than dismissive. Most people would have written themselves a very large number. "I'm not most people," Daniel said simply. "No," she agreed. "You're not." She gestured to one of the leather chairs. "Sit, please." Daniel lowered himself into the chair, feeling every scuff on his borrowed dress shoes. Caroline took the seat across from him, her posture perfect but somehow less rigid than before. "Tell me," she said, "why did you help me that day?" "You clearly needed that $5 more than I did." "Because you needed help," he answered honestly. "That's all that mattered. Even though you didn't know who I was, especially because I didn't know who you were. It wasn't about status or connections. It was just human." Caroline was quiet for a moment, her manicured fingers tapping thoughtfully on the table. "Patricia tells me you're here about the community outreach position." "Actually, that was a misunderstanding. I only came to, what do you do for work, Mr. Hayes?" "Construction, mainly. Some handyman work, whatever honest work I can find to support my daughter." "Single parent?" Daniel nodded. "My wife passed 4 years ago." Something softened in Caroline's expression. "I'm sorry." She opened the folder again, but this time she wasn't really looking at it. "Do you know what this position entails, Mr. Hayes?" "No, ma'am. Like I said, I'm just here to return. We're launching a new community foundation," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "We need someone who understands real people, real struggles, someone with integrity." She looked up at him. "Someone who would give their last $5 to help a stranger." Daniel shifted in his chair. "Ms. Bennett, I'm not qualified for, you have experience with your local food bank, correct? You volunteer there?" "Yes, but, and you've organized community support for families in crisis? Help with repairs, meals, childcare?" "Through my church, yes. But that's not the same as Mr. Hayes." Caroline leaned forward slightly. "Would you be interested in a temporary position? 3 months, to start. You would help us structure our community outreach programs, ensure we're actually helping people rather than just writing checks." Daniel's mouth felt dry. I don't have a business degree. You have something more valuable, genuine compassion and unshakable ethics." She held up the envelope he'd tried to return. "You've proven that." His mind spun with possibilities. A steady job, regular hours. No more wondering if he'd find enough work to cover the bills. "The salary is competitive," Caroline added, "and includes full benefits." Daniel thought of Lily, of her too thin jacket and the empty kitchen cabinets, but also of her pride in him being one of the good guys. "I'd need to be honest with you," he said slowly. "I have no corporate experience. I might not be what you're looking for." "Let me worry about that." Caroline stood, smoothing her dress. "Can you start Monday?" Daniel stood too, his head swimming slightly. "Yes. But the check—" "Keep it," she said firmly. "Consider it security until your first paycheck, though I suspect you still won't cash it." A slight smile touched her lips. "Patricia will handle the paperwork. Welcome to Bennett Industries, Mr. Hayes." She extended her hand. Daniel shook it, noting how her grip was just as firm as his own. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett." "Caroline," she corrected. "We'll be working closely together." She headed for the door, then paused. "And Daniel? That $5? Best investment I've made in years." Daniel adjusted his tie for the 10th time that morning, catching his reflection in Lily's bedroom mirror. The borrowed tie from Mike still felt like it belonged to someone else, someone who knew what they were doing in the corporate world. "You look handsome, Daddy," Lily said from her bed, already dressed in her school uniform. She bounced over and straightened his tie with her small hands. "Like those businessmen we see downtown. Thanks, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Ready for school?" The drive to Lily's school was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When he pulled up to the drop-off lane, Lily turned to him with serious eyes. "You're going to do great, Daddy. Just be yourself. That's why Ms. Bennett hired you." Daniel's throat tightened with emotion. "When did you get so wise?" "Mom always said I was an old soul," Lily replied with a small smile. She leaned over to hug him tight. "Love you." He watched her skip up the school steps, her backpack bouncing with each step before heading toward the gleaming tower of Bennett Industries. His old pickup truck looked out of place in the executive parking garage, surrounded by luxury vehicles that cost more than his annual income. The lobby was already bustling when he arrived. Patricia, Caroline's assistant, met him at reception with a security badge and a tablet. "Your office is on the 12th floor," she said, walking briskly toward the elevators. "You'll be sharing the space with the rest of the outreach team. It's small, but dedicated." The elevator opened onto a floor that was warmer somehow than the stark lobby. Potted plants dotted the space, and the walls featured photos of community events rather than abstract art. "Team, this is Daniel Hayes," Patricia announced to a group of 3 people gathered around a coffee maker. "He's our new community outreach coordinator." A woman about his age stepped forward first, her smile genuine. "Welcome, I'm Sarah Chen, program manager." She gestured to the others. "This is Marcus Rodriguez, our grant writer, and Jenny Kim, our volunteer coordinator." They all smiled warmly, and Daniel felt some of his nervousness ease. These people didn't look like the cold corporate types he'd expected. "We're heading to St. Mary's Shelter in 20 minutes, Sarah explained. "It's one of our partner organizations. Would you like to join us?" "Absolutely," Daniel replied, grateful for the chance to do something familiar. He'd volunteered at shelters before. This was territory he understood. As they gathered their coats, Daniel noticed a man in gray coveralls quietly mopping the floor near the water cooler. Their eyes met briefly before the man looked down. "Good morning," Daniel said warmly. The janitor's head snapped up, surprise evident on his weathered face. Good morning," he replied, as if unused to being addressed. Throughout the morning, Daniel shadowed his team as they visited St. Mary's Shelter. He watched how they interacted with the staff and residents, taking mental notes. But he couldn't help noticing how some of his colleagues spoke differently to the shelter residents than they did to each other, a subtle shift in tone that probably wasn't even conscious. During lunch, Daniel found himself sharing stories about his volunteer work at his local food bank. The team listened intently, especially when he described how they'd organized a community repair day for an elderly widow's home. "That's exactly the kind of grassroots initiative we need," Sarah said enthusiastically. "Personal involvement, not just writing checks." Back at the office, Daniel spent the afternoon reviewing current programs and proposals. The work was different from anything he'd done before, but the underlying principle was the same: finding ways to help people in need. As the day wound down, he noticed the same janitor from that morning, now emptying trash bins. Other employees rushed past without a glance, focused on their phones or conversations. "Have a good evening," Daniel called out as he passed. The man paused his work, that same surprised look crossing his face. "You too, Mr. Hayes." "Thank you." Driving home in the growing dusk, Daniel pulled over to call Lily, who was at their neighbor, Mrs. Peterson's house. "How was your first day, Daddy?" she asked eagerly. "Pretty good, sweetheart. Different from construction work, but in a good way. We visited a shelter today, met some really nice people." "Did you wear Mike's tie all day?" Daniel chuckled. "Yes, and it only felt a little weird." Are you happy? The question made him pause. You know what? I think I am. It feels like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Sounds like God's opening a new door for you, Daddy, Lily said confidently. Daniel arrived early the next morning, a thermos of coffee warming his hands as he walked through Bennett Industries' lobby. The security guard, Ted, he'd learned yesterday, gave him a friendly nod. He was just settling into his shared office space when Patricia appeared at his door. Ms. Bennett would like to join your soup kitchen visit today, she announced, checking her tablet. She's clearing her morning schedule. Daniel blinked in surprise. Of course. We leave in 20 minutes. The elevator doors opened, and Caroline Bennett stepped out, dressed more casually than he'd seen her before, though her version of casual still looked expensive. Her silk blouse and tailored slacks probably cost more than his monthly rent. Good morning, Daniel, she said, her voice crisp but not unfriendly. I hope you don't mind the company. I'd like to see our community partnerships firsthand. We're happy to have you, Daniel replied, meaning it. It's about a 15-minute drive to St. Mark's Kitchen. Caroline's driver brought her sleek town car around, but she insisted on riding with Daniel in his pickup. He caught her slight hesitation before climbing in, noting how she smoothed her slacks before sitting on the worn seat. Sorry about the mess, he said, moving Lily's math workbook from the dashboard. School carpooling. No need to apologize. Caroline's eyes lingered on the small cross hanging from his rear-view mirror. How is Lily adjusting to your new schedule? She's doing great. Our neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, watches her after school. Daniel navigated through morning traffic. Lily's excited. I'm working at such a tall building now. They pulled into St. Mark's parking lot, where volunteers were already unloading produce from a delivery truck. The kitchen's director, Martha, hurried over to greet them. Daniel, so good to see you again. She hugged him warmly before turning to Caroline. And Ms. Bennett, what an honor. We're so grateful for your company's support. Inside, the kitchen was humming with activity. Volunteers chopped vegetables and stirred enormous pots of soup, while early arrivals helped set up tables. Daniel noticed Caroline taking everything in, her expression carefully neutral. Morning, Joe. Daniel called to an elderly man in a worn plaid coat. How's that shoulder doing? Better every day, Danny boy. Joe grinned, revealing missing teeth. The exercises that nurse showed me are helping. As they moved through the kitchen, Daniel greeted more people by name. Sarah, with her 3 kids, Mr. Chen, who'd lost his job at the factory, Maria, who cleaned houses despite her arthritis. Each time, Caroline watched their interactions intently. You know everyone's story, she observed quietly as they reached the serving station. People share when they feel safe, Daniel replied, pulling on an apron. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. They worked side by side, ladling soup into bowls. Daniel noticed how Caroline's rigid posture gradually relaxed, her smile becoming more natural as she served each person. When a young mother struggled to carry her tray while holding a baby, Caroline stepped around the counter to help. During a lull, Martha invited them to take a coffee break in the small office behind the kitchen. Caroline sank into a worn chair, cradling her paper cup. I haven't been in a place like this since I was 16, she said suddenly, staring into her coffee. My mother volunteered at a shelter downtown. She'd drag my brother and me along every Sunday. Daniel waited, sensing there was more. After she died, we stopped coming. Dad threw himself into work, and I followed his example. She looked up. I'd forgotten how it feels. The warmth here, she gestured vaguely. Community, Daniel supplied. It's not just about the food. The back door opened, and Lily burst in, still wearing her school backpack. Daddy, Mrs. Peterson dropped me off early because... Oh. She stopped short, seeing Caroline. Hi, Ms. Bennett. Hello, Lily. Caroline's formal tone softened. Would you like to help serve soup? Lily's face lit up. Can I really? Soon Lily was stationed between them at the serving counter, carefully ladling soup while standing on a step stool. She chatted easily with Caroline, asking about her favorite foods and telling stories about cooking with her dad. "My mom used to make the best chicken soup when I was sick," Lily confided. "Now Daddy makes it, but he says it's not as good as hers was." Daniel saw something flicker across Caroline's face, understanding, maybe even pain, before she smiled at Lily. "I'm sure your daddy's soup is wonderful in its own way." They worked through the lunch rush, Lily beaming with pride each time someone complimented her careful serving. Caroline showed her how to avoid splashing by angling the ladle just so, and soon they had developed an efficient rhythm together. As the crowd thinned, Martha insisted they take some soup home. "You've earned it," she said, pressing containers into their hands. "Come back any time, Ms. Bennett. You're a natural." In the parking lot, Caroline's driver was waiting with her car. She turned to Daniel and Lily. "Thank you both for letting me join you today. It was enlightening." "Thank you for helping, Miss Bennett." Lily gave a little wave as Caroline slid into her car. On the drive home, Lily chattered excitedly about her day with Miss Caroline. After dinner, she spread her colored pencils across the kitchen table and began drawing intently. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Daniel asked, washing dishes at the sink. "It's a surprise," Lily replied, hunched over her paper. She hummed softly, a habit she'd inherited from her mother, as she worked, switching between colors with careful consideration. Daniel glanced over as he dried his hands. On the paper, a figure with Caroline's neat dark hair and crisp clothes had delicate wings spreading from her shoulders, done in shimmering silver pencil. The humming continued, peaceful and content, as Lily added final touches to her drawing of Miss Caroline with angel wings. Daniel wiped drops of coffee from his desk after accidentally bumping his mug. The midweek slump had hit hard, and his thoughts kept drifting to Lily's upcoming school science fair. He grabbed some paper towels and headed to the supply closet near the break room. The quiet janitor he'd been greeting each morning was there, restocking cleaning supplies. Today, something about his careful movements seemed familiar. "Need any help with those boxes?" Daniel offered. The janitor turned, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "No, but thanks. Most folks just pretend I'm invisible. I'm Daniel Hayes." He extended his hand. "Started in community outreach last week." "Jim Miller," the janitor replied, hesitating before shaking Daniel's hand. His grip was firm but cautious. They chatted while Daniel helped anyway, talking about the unseasonably cold weather and the building's ancient heating system. There was something in Jim's manner, a hint of education in his speech, careful consideration before each response, that didn't quite fit his role. As they finished, Jim reached for a high shelf. His sleeve pulled back, revealing an expensive watch that had seen better days. Daniel recognized the distinctive design. It matched the one Caroline wore. Jim noticed his gaze and quickly tugged his sleeve down, but something had clicked in Daniel's mind. The careful way Jim avoided the executive floor when Caroline was around. The familiar shape of his nose, so like Caroline's. The way he'd tensed when Daniel mentioned working with her. "You're not Jim Miller, are you?" Daniel asked quietly. The janitor's shoulders slumped. He glanced down the empty hallway before speaking in a low voice. "Paul Bennett, Caroline's brother." Daniel tried to process this revelation. "Does she know you're—" "No," Paul cut in sharply, "and she can't find out. Please." His voice softened. "It's complicated. Ancient history." They moved to a quiet corner of the break room. Paul's hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee into a paper cup. "We haven't spoken in 20 years, he explained. "After our mother died, Dad threw himself into the company. Caroline followed his lead. She was always his favorite, the one who understood business. I wanted something different." He stared into his coffee. "There was a fight about the company's direction. Dad wanted aggressive expansion. I argued for focusing on employee welfare, community investment." Caroline sided with him. "Things were said that couldn't be unsaid." "And now you work here as a janitor?" Daniel asked gently. "Ironic, isn't it?" Paul's smile was sad. Took the job 6 months ago when I saw they were hiring. Just wanted to see her sometimes, I guess. Make sure she's okay. Why not tell her? Pride. Shame. Fear she'll reject me again. Paul's voice grew urgent. Please don't tell her, Daniel. It's not your burden to carry. Daniel thought of his own family, just him and Lily now, and how precious that connection was. But he also understood the complexity of healing old wounds. I won't say anything, he promised. But Paul, she might surprise you. She's not exactly who I thought she was when I first met her. Thank you. Paul's relief was visible. I should get back to work. That evening, Daniel stayed late finishing reports. His mind kept returning to Paul's secret, wondering if keeping quiet was truly the right choice. But it wasn't his story to tell. The next morning, Martha from St. Mark's Kitchen called, her voice excited. Daniel, you'll never believe what happened. Someone left an envelope in our donation box last night, a cashier's check for $20,000. Anonymous, but the timing. Did Ms. Bennett mention anything? Daniel smiled, remembering Caroline's thoughtful expression during their visit. I couldn't say for sure, Martha, but that's wonderful news. The roof repairs we've been putting off, we can finally fix everything. It's like a miracle. After hanging up, Daniel saw Caroline walking past his office, her expression carefully neutral, as always. But now he wondered what other acts of kindness she did, quietly, away from public view. Later that night, Daniel was the last one in the office again. As he locked his door, he saw Paul at the end of the hallway, pushing his cleaning cart. Their eyes met in silent understanding, both now keepers of different pieces of Caroline's story. Paul nodded slightly before turning down another corridor. Daniel watched him go, thinking about the invisible threads that connected them all: a blank check, a bowl of soup, an anonymous donation, a brother's silent vigil, each one a piece of grace waiting to be revealed in its own time. The fluorescent lights hummed softly as Daniel made his way to the elevator, carrying the weight of unspoken words and untold stories. Sometimes, he realized, keeping a secret could be its own kind of kindness. Daniel straightened his tie as he waited outside Caroline's office. Her assistant had called him up urgently, and his stomach churned with uncertainty. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the plush carpet. "Come in, Daniel," Caroline called through the open door. He entered to find her standing by the window, a manila folder in her hands. Her usual stern expression had softened somewhat. "Please, have a seat." She gestured to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. As Daniel sat down, she settled into her own chair and opened the folder. "I've been reviewing your work these past weeks," she began, her voice warm. "The impact you've had on our outreach programs is remarkable. The shelter director called personally to tell me how you've revolutionized their meal distribution system." Daniel felt his cheeks flush. They just needed someone to listen to their challenges. "That's exactly it." Caroline leaned forward. "You listen. You see people, not problems. That's rare in this building." She paused, studying him. "Which is why I'm considering you for something bigger." She pulled out a document and slid it across the desk. "The Bennett Foundation, a new initiative I've been planning for years but never found the right person to lead." Daniel's heart skipped as he scanned the proposal. The foundation would oversee all of Bennett Industries' community programs with an annual budget in the millions. "Me?" His voice cracked slightly. "But I've only been here a few weeks." "Sometimes a few weeks is all it takes to know." Caroline's eyes held his. "I've watched you, Daniel. The way you treat everyone, from the cleaning staff to the CEO, with the same respect. That's the kind of leadership we need." She stood and walked to the window again. "Tell me about your life. How did you end up here?" Daniel's throat tightened. He rarely spoke about this, but something in Caroline's manner invited honesty. "Sarah, my wife, she got sick 4 years ago. Cancer. It moved fast." He took a deep breath. "I was working in corporate sales then. Good money, but after..." After she was gone, none of it meant anything. I couldn't stand the emptiness of it. Caroline turned back, her face softened with understanding. Lily was only 5, Daniel continued. She needed me present, not buried in work. So I quit, took local jobs that let me be there for her. Started volunteering at the soup kitchen. Found purpose there that sales never gave me. And the financial impact? Caroline asked gently. It's been, Daniel managed a small smile, creative budgeting. Lots of prayers. But Lily's happy, and that's what matters. A commotion outside the office interrupted them. The door burst open, and Lily bounded in, her backpack bouncing. Daddy, Miss Caroline, look what I made! She stopped short, realizing she'd interrupted something important. Oh, sorry. But Caroline was already smiling, wider than Daniel had ever seen. Come show us, Lily. Lily pulled out a large piece of construction paper covered in colorful drawings. It's for my social studies project. About helping others. She spread it on Caroline's desk. The page showed stick figures serving food, giving clothes, and holding hands. In the center, 3 figures stood out, a tall man, a little girl, and a woman in a business suit. See? Lily pointed proudly. That's Daddy helping at the kitchen, and me helping serve soup, and you helping everybody with your company. Miss Caroline. Caroline touched the drawing gently. This is beautiful, Lily. You captured it perfectly. My teacher said we should draw what inspires us, Lily explained. And Daddy says you inspire him because you're using your success to help people. Daniel felt his face grow warm, but Caroline's expression was touched. Your daddy inspires me too, she said softly. Both of you do. After Lily skipped back out to wait with Caroline's assistant, the mood in the office had shifted. Something had opened between them, like a window letting in fresh air. The foundation position, Caroline said, it comes with a significant salary increase. Full benefits, including college savings plans. She smiled. And I believe the first order of business would be reviewing heating assistance programs for local families. Daniel's mind spun with possibilities. No more choosing between groceries and utilities. No more patching Lily's winter boots instead of buying new ones. A future where his daughter's dreams weren't limited by his empty bank account. On the drive home that evening, with Lily chattering about her art project in the passenger seat, Daniel allowed himself to imagine the house warm in winter without extra sweaters, a pantry filled with good food, a college fund growing steadily for Lily. The thought brought tears to his eyes, not from worry this time, but from gratitude. He reached over and squeezed Lily's hand. "What are you thinking about, Daddy?" she asked. Daniel smiled, remembering that morning weeks ago when he'd given away his last $5. "I'm thinking about how God works in mysterious ways, sweetheart." Lily grinned. "Like sending us Miss Caroline?" "Exactly like that." They drove on through the gentle evening, toward home and new possibilities. Neither of them had imagined just a few weeks before. Daniel noticed something was off the moment he stepped into Bennett Industries that Friday morning. The usual friendly nods from coworkers were replaced with averted gazes and hushed conversations that stopped when he walked by. In the break room, he poured his morning coffee while two accounting employees quickly gathered their things and left, shooting furtive glances his way. His stomach tightened as he caught a snippet of their whispered conversation. "Can't believe she fell for it." Back at his desk, his email inbox was suspiciously empty of the usual morning updates. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Man, you need to see this. Call me ASAP." Before he could respond, a link appeared from another coworker. Business Insider Weekly, The 5 Con, How a Small-Town Manipulator Fooled a CEO. Daniel's coffee turned cold in his grip as he clicked the link. The article's headline blared across his screen in bold letters, "Calculated Kindness, the Truth Behind Bennett Industries' Latest PR Disaster." The piece painted an ugly picture. According to anonymous sources, Daniel had orchestrated the entire roadside encounter, They claimed he'd researched Caroline's regular routes, deliberately planted himself there with just enough gas to seem desperate, and manipulated her emotions with his single father story. His hands shook as he scrolled through the comments section. Classic con artist move. Poor Caroline Bennett, trying to do good and getting played. Should have known better than to trust a stranger. The office phone on his desk rang, making him jump. "Daniel Hayes," he answered, his voice barely steady. "Mr. Hayes, please come to the executive floor immediately." The voice belonged to Caroline's assistant, cold and formal. The elevator ride felt endless. Each floor's soft ding echoed his pounding heart. In Caroline's outer office, he found not just her assistant, but 2 members of the legal team and the head of HR. Caroline sat behind her desk, face drawn and professional. No trace remained of the warm woman who'd discussed the foundation with him days earlier. A copy of the article lay on her desk. "Daniel," her voice was controlled, careful. "I'm sure you've seen the story by now." "Caroline, none of it is true," he started, but she held up a hand. "The board has convened an emergency meeting this morning. They're concerned about potential damage to the company's reputation." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "Until this situation can be properly investigated, we have no choice but to place you on administrative suspension." "But," the words stuck in his throat, "you know me. You know that's not who I am, do I?" Her voice held an edge of hurt. "The article raises some compelling points about your financial situation prior to our meeting. Your history of job changes, the timing of everything. I gave you my last $5 because it was the right thing to do." His voice cracked. "I returned your blank check instead of cashing it. How could you think?" "Please." She cut him off. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." She nodded to HR. "Security will escort you to collect your things." The walk back to his desk felt like a march of shame. Coworkers peered over cubicle walls, quickly ducking when he looked their way. His family photo of him and Lily at the soup kitchen was still on his desk, their smiles now seeming to mock him. As he packed the photo into a box, Paul the janitor, Caroline's brother, paused in the doorway. Their eyes met, sharing a moment of understanding. Paul knew the truth about Daniel's character, but he also knew the weight of Caroline's walls when she felt betrayed. Outside in the parking lot, Daniel sat in his truck, unable to start the engine. The blank check was still in his wallet, where Caroline had insisted he keep it as security. He pulled it out, the paper now worn at the edges from being carried so long. The sky darkened as he sat there, watching employees leave for the day. Each one carefully avoided looking at his truck. Finally, he drove home, but couldn't bring himself to pull into the driveway. Instead, he parked across the street, staring at his dark house where Lily was probably wondering why he was late. The check seemed to burn in his hands as he held it under the streetlight. One signature, any amount he wanted. It could have solved everything weeks ago, but he'd chosen honesty, chosen trust. And now that very decision was being used to paint him as a calculating fraud. The porch light flicked on. Through the window, he could see Lily's silhouette peering out, probably watching for his headlights. His daughter, who'd been so proud of her father working at Miss Caroline's company, who'd drawn pictures of them, all helping others together. Daniel pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. The blank check crumpled in his fist, feeling like the cruelest joke ever played on a man trying to do the right thing. The Saturday morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Daniel sat at the table, his untouched coffee growing cold. Lily bounded down the stairs in her favorite weekend pajamas, her smile fading when she saw her father's expression. "Daddy? What's wrong?" Daniel patted the chair next to him. "Come here, sweetheart. We need to talk about something." Lily climbed into the chair, her small feet dangling above the floor. She reached for his hand, her fingers wrapping around his larger ones. "You know how I've been working at Bennett Industries?" Daniel began, his voice rough. "Well, there's been some trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Lily's grip tightened. Some people wrote some untrue things about me, about why I helped Miss Caroline that day with the gas money." He swallowed hard. "And now I can't work there anymore, at least for a while." Lily's lower lip trembled. "But that's not fair. You're the best helper they have." "I know it's not fair, honey." Daniel pulled her close. "Sometimes life isn't fair, but we have to trust that God has a plan." Lily finished in a small voice, but it lacked her usual conviction. Throughout the weekend, Daniel avoided leaving the house. He made excuses about errands and grocery shopping, sending Lily with the neighbor to Sunday school instead of taking her himself. The thought of facing his community, of seeing the sideways glances and hearing the whispered conversations, was too much to bear. Monday morning, Mike showed up at his door, practically pushing his way inside. "You can't hide forever, man." "I'm not hiding," Daniel protested, but even he didn't believe it. Mike grabbed 2 mugs from the cabinet, helping himself to the coffee pot. "Look, we need to fight back. Write our own story, get the truth out there." "With what proof?" Daniel sank into a kitchen chair. "It's my word against theirs. And who's going to believe the broke single dad over a bunch of corporate executives?" "The people who know you," Mike insisted. "The folks at the soup kitchen, the shelter volunteers. I can't drag them into this mess." Daniel's voice was heavy with defeat. "Besides, what's the point? The damage is done." Meanwhile, across town in her corner office, Caroline Bennett was conducting her own investigation. Something about the article had been nagging at her. The timing, the convenient anonymous sources, the perfectly crafted narrative to derail the Foundation's launch. She'd spent the weekend reviewing internal communications, following paper trails that led to one name, Mark Dalton. Her screen displayed a chain of emails between Dalton and several business blogs, carefully worded but clear in their intent to plant doubt about Daniel's character. "Miss Bennett?" Her assistant appeared in the doorway. "I found those records you requested. Mr. Dalton has been systematically opposing the Foundation project since its inception. He's been particularly vocal in board member conversations about the budget allocation." Caroline's jaw tightened. She'd known Dalton resisted change, but this level of manipulation struck at something deeper. "Thank you, Sarah. Please clear my schedule for the afternoon." Hours passed as Caroline dug deeper. She discovered Dalton had been quietly undermining other community initiatives for years, viewing them as threats to the company's profit margins. The article attacking Daniel was just his latest move to protect his vision of corporate success. The sun was setting when Caroline finally looked up from her computer, casting an orange glow across her office. Her eyes fell on her desk drawer, where she kept the blank check Daniel had returned. She pulled it out, studying his neat handwriting on the envelope he'd used to return it. The memory of their first real conversation hit her. Not the roadside encounter, but here in this office. She'd been so focused on her own agenda, on proving her instincts about him right or wrong, that she'd never simply asked for his side of the story. The check lay flat on her desk, a symbol of both trust given and trust betrayed. But who had really betrayed whom? Daniel had returned a blank check that could have solved all his problems. She, on the other hand, had let others poison her faith in him without ever giving him a chance to defend himself. Caroline stood and walked to her window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. The blank check remained on her desk, a silent reminder of choices made and truths ignored. Below her, she could see Paul finishing his evening rounds, methodically checking each door as he had for years. Her own brother, working as a janitor in her building, another truth she'd failed to see clearly. How many other blind spots did she have? How many assumptions had she made without bothering to look deeper? The article's accusation seemed hollow now, viewed against the evidence of Daniel's character, his consistent kindness, his work with the community, his integrity in returning the check. She'd let fear of public opinion and board pressure override her own judgment, becoming exactly the kind of leader she'd always promised herself she wouldn't be. Her office phone buzzed. "Ms. Bennett? Security found something you should see. We have footage of Mr. Dalton entering the building last Sunday, accessing files from the foundation project. Caroline stared at the blank check on her desk, her reflection ghosted in the window glass. She had never asked Daniel for his truth, but now she knew exactly what she needed to do about it. Monday morning arrived with a crisp brightness that belied the tension filling Bennett Industries' executive floor. Board members and shareholders filed into the grand conference room, their murmured conversations falling silent as Caroline Bennett strode through the double doors. She wore her signature Navy power suit, but there was something different about her demeanor. Her usual calculated poise had been replaced by a fierce determination that made several board members shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. "Ladies and gentlemen," Caroline began, her voice cutting through the quiet like steel. "I've called this emergency meeting to address the recent allegations against Daniel Hayes and our community outreach program." Mark Dalton leaned back in his chair, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Caroline, we've already discussed—" "No," she interrupted, her palms striking the polished conference table. "You've discussed, you've plotted, you've manipulated, but now I'm going to speak, and you're all going to listen." The room fell completely silent. Even the usual tap of phones and tablets ceased. 6 weeks ago, my car ran out of gas on Robertson Road. Caroline moved away from the head of the table, slowly walking its length as she spoke. "It was cold, starting to snow, and I was running late for a meeting. That's when Daniel Hayes stopped to help me." She paused, meeting the eyes of each person around the table. He had $5 in his wallet. His last $5. His daughter needed lunch money. His heat was about to be shut off, and he hadn't eaten breakfast himself. But he gave me that $5 without hesitation. Near the back of the room, Paul quietly slipped in through the service entrance, cloth in hand, as if he were there to clean. But his eyes never left his sister as she continued. "I left him a blank check that day, thinking I was being generous." Caroline's voice softened with self-deprecation. "Instead of cashing it for thousands, which he could have easily done, he drove to this building to return it. That's the man you've accused of manipulation and fraud." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder, dropping it onto the table with a satisfying thud. "This contains evidence that the article attacking Daniel Hayes was orchestrated by someone in this room, someone who saw our community foundation as a threat to their bottom line." Mark Dalton's smirk vanished. Other board members began shifting their attention between him and the folder. The emails, the planted stories, the anonymous sources. "It's all here." Caroline's voice grew stronger. "But more importantly, I have something else to share." She pressed a button on the conference room phone. "Sarah, please send in the reports." Her assistant entered with a stack of binders, distributing them quickly around the table. "These are the results of our community outreach programs since Daniel Hayes joined us. Shelter attendance up 40%. Volunteer recruitment doubled. 3 new corporate partnerships for job training programs. And most importantly, a 17% increase in positive community engagement scores." Paul watched from his corner, tears welling in his eyes as his sister, the sister he'd thought lost to corporate ambition, championed the values they'd both been raised with. "I am hereby announcing that Daniel Hayes is not only reinstated, but appointed as the executive director of the newly formed Bennett Foundation, effective immediately." Caroline's voice rang with authority. "And if anyone in this room has a problem with that, I suggest you review the ethics clause in your contracts very carefully." She turned to Mark Dalton. "Especially you, Mark. The board will be receiving a full report of your activities this afternoon. I suggest you use the morning to clean out your office." The tension in the room had shifted. Where there had been skepticism, now there was a mixture of respect and chagrin. Several board members were already paging through the reports, nodding with approval at the numbers. "One last thing," Caroline added, her voice softening slightly. "Daniel Hayes reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Success isn't just about profit margins and stock prices. It's about the impact we have on people's lives. It's about doing what's right, especially when, it costs us something. She caught Paul's eye across the room, and for a moment decades of distance seemed to evaporate. He gave her a small nod, pride shining through his tears. "Meeting adjourned," Caroline declared. "Sarah, please get Daniel Hayes on the phone. Tell him I need him at headquarters right now." As the board members filed out, some pausing to express their support for the foundation, Caroline remained standing at the head of the table. She watched Paul slip quietly back through the service door, knowing that another conversation, perhaps the most important one, still lay ahead. Her phone buzzed. Sarah's message appeared. "Mr. Hayes is on his way." Daniel's footsteps echoed through Bennett Industries' marble lobby as security waved him through. His heart pounded, not from nerves this time, but from hope rekindled. The elevator ride to the community outreach floor felt different somehow, as if the weight of uncertainty had lifted. As the doors opened, he heard it first: applause. His small team of outreach coordinators stood gathered in the open office space, their faces beaming. Sarah, Caroline's assistant, smiled warmly and gestured for him to join them. "Welcome back, Mr. Hayes," she said, her usual formality softened by genuine warmth. The applause grew louder as Daniel walked toward them, his cheeks flushing. He'd never been comfortable in the spotlight, but the sincere joy in his colleagues' faces touched him deeply. These were good people who'd believed in him even when the rumors swirled. Caroline emerged from her office, her professional demeanor brightened by an unusual smile. She joined the group, raising her hands to quiet the applause. "Everyone," she announced, "I'd like to officially introduce Daniel Hayes, Executive Director of the Bennett Foundation." She turned to face him directly. "Daniel, you'll have a proper office up here now, right next to mine. We have work to do." The team crowded around, offering congratulations and sharing ideas they'd been holding on to. Daniel noticed how their enthusiasm had grown since his first day, how their initial skepticism had transformed into genuine excitement for the foundation's possibilities. As the impromptu celebration continued, Paul appeared at the edge of the group, still in his janitor's uniform. He hung back, watching Caroline with an expression that mixed pride and longing. Daniel caught his eye and gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility, until Paul finally stepped forward. "Caroline," he said softly. She turned, her professional smile freezing as recognition dawned. The office fell silent. "Paul?" Her voice wavered, something no one had ever heard before. "But how long have you?" 3 years, he admitted. "I took the job under Mom's maiden name. I wanted to be close, even if I couldn't find the right words to say." Caroline gripped the edge of a desk, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Why didn't you tell me?" "The same reason you never reached out," Paul said gently. "Pride, fear, thinking too much time had passed." He glanced at Daniel. "But watching how someone treats others when they think no one's looking, it teaches you things, makes you remember what matters." The office staff quietly dispersed, giving the siblings privacy. Daniel started to step away, but Caroline's hand shot out, gripping his arm. "Stay," she whispered. "Please." Paul moved closer, his voice thick with emotion. "Remember what Dad used to say? Compassion isn't weakness, it's the strongest choice you can make." I forgot that for a while. Maybe we both did. Caroline nodded, tears threatening her perfect makeup. "That stupid fight over the company shares. I was so determined to prove myself, to show I could make it bigger, better, and I was too stubborn to admit you might be right about modernizing," Paul finished. 20 years of silence over pride. "I see you almost every day," Caroline said, her voice breaking. "How did I not know?" "Because you stopped looking," Paul said softly. "Until Daniel started saying good morning to the janitor, started asking about my family, sharing coffee in the break room. It reminded me of how you used to be, how we both used to be." Caroline turned to Daniel, her grip on his arm loosening but not letting go. "The $5," she said. "It wasn't just about helping me that day, was it? It was about remembering who I wanted to be." Daniel shook his head. "Sometimes we all need reminding that every person has value," he said simply. "No matter their job or their past or how much money they have in their wallet." Paul stepped forward and after a moment's hesitation wrapped his sister in a hug. She stiffened briefly, then melted into the embrace, years of corporate armor falling away. When they finally separated, both wiping tears, Caroline turned to Daniel. "Could you give us a moment? And then I'd like to speak with you privately." Daniel nodded and walked to the break room, giving the siblings space to begin healing their long-broken bond. Through the glass walls, he could see them talking, Caroline's hands moving animatedly as Paul smiled, looking more like an executive's brother than a janitor. 20 minutes later, Caroline appeared in the break room doorway. Her makeup was perfectly restored, but her eyes held a new softness. "Daniel," she said, closing the door behind her, "I need to thank you, not just for returning the check or for your work here, but for helping me remember something I'd lost." She sat across from him, her usual barrier of professional distance gone. That $5. It wasn't just gas money. It was a reminder that genuine kindness still exists. That success isn't measured by quarterly reports. "God works in mysterious ways," Daniel said simply. Caroline smiled. "Yes, he does. Even through stranded CEOs and their last-dollar rescuers." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "The foundation is yours to shape, Daniel. I trust your vision completely." Later that afternoon, Daniel left the office with a new key card, a proper business card, and a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in years. He picked up Lily from school, his daughter bouncing with excitement as he shared the news. "Does this mean we can have Miss Caroline over for dinner?" Lily asked, her eyes bright. "I want to show her my new art project. It's about helping people, just like you and her do now." Daniel smiled, watching his daughter's enthusiasm in the rearview mirror. "I think Miss Caroline would like that very much, sweetheart. She's learning to open her heart again." "Just like you did after Mommy went to heaven?" Lily asked softly. "Something like that," Daniel agreed, reaching back to squeeze her knee. "Sometimes people need a little help remembering how to let love in." Snowflakes drifted lazily through the December evening, dusting the newly repaired roof of St. Mary's Soup Kitchen. Christmas lights twinkled along the eaves, casting a warm glow across the fresh paint and renovated entrance. The parking lot was full, not with people seeking meals tonight, but with the entire community gathering to celebrate the kitchen's grand reopening under the Bennett Foundation's sponsorship. Daniel stood near the entrance, greeting familiar faces as they stamped snow from their boots. His navy suit, a gift from Caroline he'd finally accepted, felt comfortable now, like he was growing into this new role. Lily bounced beside him in a red velvet dress, her excitement making her practically vibrate. "Look, Daddy," she exclaimed, pointing to the new sign above the door. "It's so pretty." The wooden sign read, "St. Mary's Community Kitchen, where all are welcome," in elegant gold lettering, with "supported by the Bennett Foundation" in smaller text below. It replaced the old, weathered marker that had hung there for decades. Caroline arrived just as the celebration was beginning, somehow managing to look both elegant and approachable in a forest green wool coat. She'd been making an effort to dress less intimidatingly for community events, though Daniel suspected Lily's fashion advice might have something to do with it. "Miss Caroline," Lily called out, rushing to give her a hug. Caroline's face softened as she returned the embrace, a transformation Daniel had watched unfold over recent weeks. Inside, the kitchen was transformed. New industrial appliances gleamed in the expanded cooking area. Fresh paint brightened the walls, now adorned with local children's artwork. Round tables replaced the old rectangular ones, creating a more welcoming atmosphere for sharing meals. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd volunteered at the kitchen for 30 years, wiped tears from her eyes as she hugged Daniel. "Look what you've done for us," she whispered. all because you stopped to help a stranger that day. Other volunteers gathered around, sharing stories of how the renovation would help them serve more people, offer cooking classes, and create a true community gathering space. Caroline listened intently to each one, taking mental notes, her CEO efficiency now channeled into making real change. "Remember when the roof leaked right onto the serving line?" Tom, the weekend coordinator, laughed. "Now look at this place." The official ceremony was brief, just how Daniel had requested it. He gave a short speech about community and hope, carefully deflecting praise to the volunteers who'd kept the kitchen running through lean years. Caroline spoke about the foundation's commitment to long-term support, her corporate polish warmed by genuine emotion. But it was during the casual celebration afterward that the real magic happened. Volunteers and regular patrons mingled freely, sharing coffee and fresh-baked cookies. The barriers between giving and receiving, between success and struggle, seemed to blur under the soft glow of Christmas lights. Daniel watched as Caroline chatted with a young mother who'd once relied on the kitchen and now volunteered whenever she could. The CEO's usual reserved expression had melted into something softer, more genuine. She'd been spending more time here lately, not just for foundation business, but to really know the people. Snow continued to fall outside the windows as evening deepened. Someone started playing carols on the kitchen's donated piano. The smell of hot chocolate and cinnamon filled the air. Daniel felt something deep in his chest unlock, a tension he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. Lily, who'd been helping serve cookies, appeared suddenly at Caroline's side. Her small hand, still wearing the red mittens Caroline had given her last week, slipped into the older woman's grasp. Caroline looked down, surprised but pleased at the child's touch. "Miss Caroline," Lily said in that clear, innocent voice that always seemed to cut straight to truth, "I think God gave you our 5. Daniel, standing nearby, caught his breath. Caroline knelt down to Lily's level, something she would never have done months ago. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Well," Lily continued, swinging their joined hands slightly, "Daddy always says God works in mysterious ways, and if he hadn't given you our last 5 that day, you wouldn't have left the check, and Daddy wouldn't have returned it, and you wouldn't have given him the job, and," she gestured around the bright, warm room, "all this wouldn't have happened. So really, God just borrowed our 5 to make something bigger." Caroline's eyes met Daniel's over Lily's head, both of them struck by the simple wisdom in those words. The CEO, who once measured everything in profit margins and strategic advantages, found herself blinking back tears. "You're very right, Lily," Caroline said softly. "God did use that 5 to make something much bigger. He used it to remind me what really matters." The piano player started "Silent Night," and the conversations around them softened. Daniel moved closer to Lily and Caroline, feeling the peace of the moment settle over him. Through the windows, he could see the snow creating a gentle blanket over the world, making everything new. The Christmas lights reflected off the fresh paint and new windows, creating a warm glow that seemed to embrace everyone in the room. Looking around, Daniel saw not just a renovated building, but restored hope. The faithful volunteers who'd kept this place going through the lean years, the community that had rallied around him when the rumors flew, his daughter, who never doubted that good things would come, and Caroline, who'd found her way back to her better self through an act of simple kindness. His faith, tested but unbroken, filled him with a quiet joy. This wasn't just about a job or a foundation or even a renovated soup kitchen. It was about how God could take $5 worth of trust and multiply it into something that changed not just lives, but hearts. The peace that settled over him in that moment felt like a blessing, a divine acknowledgement that sometimes the biggest miracles start with the smallest acts of faith. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.